Welcome back, everybody, to the New York Knicks, MyNBA franchise here on NBA2K23. Today's a pretty big day. We've got the 2024 NBA draft, and along with that, we also have the expansion draft as well, which we will briefly cover here in the opening minutes of today's episode. We've got two new expansion teams in the league, the Seattle Sonics, who are now in the Western Conference, and the Baltimore Red Tails, who are not only in the East, but they are also in our division. Not that divisions really matter all that much in the NBA. Going into this year's NBA draft, we have 5 picks, 3 in the first round. We got pretty unlucky with the draft lottery, and we will be picking with 9, 15, and 22. Last episode was the draft preview. We went over some guys we may be interested in with all of our draft picks, so in case you missed that episode, I'll leave a card at the top right of the screen so you can go ahead and check that out. Before we get to the NBA draft, we'll briefly do the expansion draft first. We can protect 8 players on our roster from the opposing expansion team. So these are the 8 we're going to go with. Barrett and DiCarlo felt like no-brainers, along with Jalen Brunson. I also did Mitchell Robinson, even though he wants out and probably will never play another game here with the Knicks. I still think we can get some good value for him, and we also did Quickly, Kabongo, Reddish, and Feinstein. There are some good young players down the board who I did not protect, like Wendell Moore, Splash Mayo, and Jackson Watkins, but I'm pretty confident the expansion teams won't pick those guys, and once we have one person selected, nobody else on our roster is eligible to get picked, and I'm anticipating that'll be Jae'Sean Tate. So as we went through the expansion drafts, you may notice Ahmed Kabongo is on the Sonics. I protected Kabongo, so he wouldn't go anywhere, but the problem is I accidentally forgot to save it. So what I thought the most fair thing to do would be to swap Jae'Sean Tate for Kabongo, because I think Jae'Sean Tate's the person they would have picked instead. The only problem is I can't, because he is a team option. So what we're going to do is I will accept Tate's team option in the next episode, and then I will send him to Seattle for Kabongo. So Kabongo will be a Sonic for today, and then he will come back to the Knicks. Along with Kabongo, I guess for now, they do have some talented young players. They have multiple young centers, including former Knick Jericho Sims, so I think they'll be fine without Kabongo. And then here are the Red Tails, who interestingly drafted Lou Dort, who the Thunder surprisingly decided to leave unprotected. And it surprises me because that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's good buddy. This gives SGA more reason to want to possibly request a trade in the future from the Thunder, which has been a main talking point since the start of last season, and very well could be something that happens, hell, maybe today, who knows. So as we now go into the NBA draft, before we start, we've got one more order of business, and that's talking about some trades around the league, and there are some big ones. The Bulls are tearing it down. DeRozan and Lonzo Ball are free agents, and Zach LaVine will be getting traded to the Charlotte Hornets, who were really good last year, for a couple young players, J.R. Johnson and Jackson Hayes, along with a future first and 2 second-rounders this year. J.R. Johnson's a really, really good young piece. The Hornets are going for it, and the Bulls are rebuilding. The Magic are going to be trading away Wendell Carter, a guy who doesn't really fit in their long-term future, to the new expansion Baltimore Red Tails in exchange for a couple of guys, including big man Paul Gibbons. So the deal is accepted. Wendell Carter is going to Baltimore. Ben Simmons has been traded from the Nets to the Suns. So Brooklyn is going all in on this rebuild, and they have decided to move on from Ben Simmons. They're going to be focusing on all of their young talent. These two teams made a blockbuster trade at the deadline, with the Suns acquiring Kevin Durant. Things didn't really go well for the Suns after the trade, so they're trying to add another piece. They're giving away Christian Harris and some draft picks. Christian Harris is a good young player who they were able to hold on to with the original KD trade. They also have the number 4 overall pick, which is not in this trade. So along with their talented core, Phoenix also has a top 5 pick as well. As we look at this draft class, there's a lot of really fun young players here. Again, we went through all of these guys within the prospect profiles earlier. So again, in case you missed that, I will leave a card at the top right so you all can check that out. So as we look at the mock drafts, of course, the Spurs have the number 1 pick, and it seems like it'll be one of Cason Castillo from UCLA or Adeyemi Onuaku from Nigeria, who is currently playing in France. So it'll be interesting to see which way the Spurs end up going with. Personally, I think they'll lean towards Onuaku. And then with our picks, Draft Express with the 9th overall selection has us going with J.J. Henderson, the talented wing out of Memphis. I don't think that's going to happen just because I don't think he will fall to 9, but if he does, that could be a good pick. They also have us getting Woody Boxemer out of Michigan State, at 15, and then Julius Jeter with our other first-round pick. And then in the second round, they have us going with Weston Lamontagne and Akihiko Kiyama. As for 2K, they have Onuaku going number 1 with Cason Castillo at number 2. And they have us going with Babatunde Precocious out of Texas Tech with the 9th pick. I think that choice would make a lot of sense for us. At 15, they have us going with Misurli, the big center from Germany. And then at 22, they have us going with KJ Story, the twin brother of Jalen Story out of Clemson. And then in the second round, they have us going with Kiyama again, along with Abraham Mbaye out of Kansas. Then the last mock draft we have here is NBA.com. They have the Spurs going with Castillo number 1, and then they have Monteo Moore going number 2 over Adeyemi Onuaku. I think that sounds like a great scenario for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They'd probably be jumping around in circles with excitement. And then with the 9th pick, they have us going with Coco Diablo out of Villanova, another pick that I think would make a lot of sense for us. They have us getting Jalen Story at 15, and then Kenny Cooks with our other first-round pick. I think all of those are pretty solid value picks, but I don't know if we're going to go all guard in the first round. And then in round 2, they have us going with Otto Dudal and Aleem Strachan. So there's our, I guess, additions in terms of adding some size. So let's not waste any more time and get this show on the road. The 2024 NBA Draft is now here, and the Oklahoma City Thunder are on the clock. I thought the Spurs had the number 1 pick. Well, the Spurs have traded the number 1 selection just moments before the start of the draft to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So we've got a blockbuster. Picks 3, 7, 16, and a future first rounder are headed to San Antonio in exchange for the number 1 pick, the number 30 pick, a second rounder, and Keldon Johnson, who is joining the Oklahoma City Thunder. Oklahoma City really likes Keldon Johnson, and there's a big reason for that. It's because they want to keep Shai Gilgeous-Alexander happy. Both Shai and Keldon Johnson played at the University of Kentucky. Now, they did play 1 year apart, so they were never teammates at Kentucky, but it appears there is a relationship there between the two of them. Reportedly, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is very excited about having Keldon Johnson on the team, and thus, it doesn't seem like Shai is going to have interest in leaving Oklahoma City for the time being. Along with that, there's a player the Thunder really want with the number 1 pick, so this kills 2 birds with 1 stone for them. They get their guy, and they please their franchise player. So now that the Oklahoma City Thunder have traded for the number 1 pick in this year's draft, let's see who the guy they have been really wanting is. With the first pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, the Oklahoma City Thunder select Adeyemi Onuaku, a 6'11" power forward from Nigeria. He last played for Metropolitans 92 in France. So this is the prospect who Oklahoma City really wanted, and they figured with having all of these draft picks, why not go up and get our guy? There's a reason why the Thunder have been stockpiling draft picks to be able to go up and get franchise changers like this. They figured there was no realistic way he would fall to 3, so they get their guy. With the second pick, the Houston Rockets select J.J. Henderson from Memphis. So we've got a shocker here at the number 2 overall pick. I don't think this is a bad selection for the Rockets. I think Henderson really fits their roster well. One of the best spot-up shooters in this draft. Good playmaker, versatile defender. I don't really have a problem with this pick. I'm just a little bit surprised that they ended up doing it. This wouldn't be the first time the Rockets pulled a curveball on us. Last year, obviously, they drafted Jaden Lewis-Cameron with the number 1 pick, which nobody saw coming. And I think in hindsight, the Rockets wish they could have that back. But I think J.J. Henderson's going to end up being a better choice. And fittingly, Onuaku and Henderson are the 2 youngest players in the entire draft class. And sure enough, they end up being the top 2 selections. So the Spurs now have a bunch of first-round picks in this year's draft, including pick 3. And they select Nikolai Shevchenko from the Czech Republic. So the Spurs' plan in making that big trade with the Thunder was that they did not want one of the top guys at the number 1 pick. Shevchenko was the number 1 player on the Spurs board, and they knew he was going to fall to 3. So they figure they might as well get some additional draft picks. Yes, they had to trade away Keldon Johnson, but it seems like the Spurs are more so excited about the possibility of having all those draft picks rather than Keldon Johnson. With the 4th pick, the Phoenix Suns select Johnny Conchery Jr., a talented point guard out of Syracuse. With Chris Paul retiring, Conchery will be the replacement. I think this is a perfect fit for him. This kid's a winner. Led Syracuse to the national championship, and he is joining a loaded Phoenix Suns roster. The Suns were very disappointing last year, but I think they could be a lot better with the additions of Simmons and now Conchery. If things go kind of competitive South next year for the Suns and they still want to contend, maybe Contre's name comes up in trade talks. With the 5th pick, the Baltimore Red Tails select Seth McRobert out of LSU. So Baltimore's first ever draft selection is McRobert, the talented wing from Louisiana State University. I think this is a really solid selection for them. He's a better defender than I've really given him credit for throughout the pre-draft process. And he's a good offensive player, really good athlete. So I think he's the type of guy who they can build their culture around in Baltimore. So as we've now made it through the top 5, one of the most fascinating storylines now is Casey Castillo dropping out at the top 5. This is a guy who was projected to be the number 1 pick by most outlets, and if not number 1, number 2. Apparently, organizations are kind of concerned with this kid's character. He doesn't play tough defense. Apparently, he didn't interview well. So there is some legitimate concern around NBA teams that Casey Castillo is more of a me-oriented guy rather than a team-oriented guy. We'll see how far he falls forward as the Sonics go with a different guard. Monte Moore out of USC is the pick. Moore is a really good player, another guy who I think could be a culture changer here for the Seattle Sonics, but I am really surprised to see a player of Casey Castillo's talent dropping out of the top 6, and now the Knicks could realistically land him. Or not. He ends up going number 7 to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So OKC has had themselves a day today. They've acquired Keldon Johnson, a talented player who is going to re-energize Shai Gilgeous-Alexander wanting to stay here. And along with that, they have added both Adeyemi Onuaku and Casey Castillo, who were the consensus top 2 players in this draft class. This is a Sam Presti masterclass, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Presti is cooking in the lab right now. 1 pick away from the Knicks as the Spurs select Percy Butler out of Oklahoma State. Percy Butler is a tough physical player, plays with a chip on his shoulder, has that dog in him, but I'm a little bit surprised he went this high. I don't have a major problem with him being a top 10 pick because he is a really good player, but I'm just surprised by it. I thought he was a guy who the Knicks would really consider with one of their later first-round picks at 15 or 22, but he's not even on the board for their first selection here at number 9 overall. So there's been no shortage of fireworks so far here in the draft, and there are some really solid players on the board. I mean, let's look at these top 4 guys. Juno, Precocious, Ramses, and Diablo. All of them were in the building for pre-draft workouts. All of them are really talented players, and I think each of them make a case to be the 9th overall pick here. Along with that, I also wanted to look at some trades in the Trade Finder, and there aren't many good ones. And I mean, we can get Levi Beauregard from the Nets, which is ironic because everybody wanted us to draft him last year. I think the other kind of interesting trade here is that both of the expansion teams gave us good offers. Monte Moore and Wendell Carter, both available for this pick, but we're going to say no. We're going to pick one of these 4 guys on the board. Juno, Precocious, Ramses, or Diablo. Which one is it going to be? With the 9th pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, the New York Knicks select DJ Ramses, a shooting guard out of Syracuse. So the hometown New York kid is staying in the Big Apple. He grew up in the New York City area as a big Knicks fan, went to Syracuse, won a national championship, and now he gets to play for his hometown team here in the NBA. DJ Ramses is the type of player I build my teams around, as someone who's a very versatile wing on both ends of the floor. And when we entered this draft, he was my target all along with the 9th overall pick. So for him to fall here, it was a pretty easy pick for me when it was all said and done to select him. DJ stands at 6'6", 200 pounds, explosive athlete, plays with his head above the rim. He's got a really fun offensive skill set. This is somebody who's very versatile as a scorer. He can create his own shot off the ball, off of screens and whatnot. He's a really good passer as well. He sees the floor well. He's a good on- and off-ball playmaker. He mainly played off the ball at Syracuse with Johnny Contre being there, so I don't think it'll be too much for him to adjust to playing with a point guard like Cesar DiCarlo. On the ball, he's really good as well. He can create his own shot off the dribble with ease. The weakness with him is defense. He's not a great defender yet, and it's not for a lack of effort, but he's got to improve on that end of the floor. But I think he will. He's got really good size and length, 6'6", 6'6", 200 pounds, long arms. I think he will be a good defender with time. He's only 19 years old, so I think if he develops on that end of the floor, he could be this team's franchise player going forward, and I'm really excited to have DJ Ramses here as a New York Knick. Keep in mind, we have another pick at number 15 overall, not too far away, as the Utah Jazz with the 10th pick select Babatunde Precocious out of Texas Tech. Really solid pick here by the Jazz. He was one of the 4 guys who we were considering with our 9th overall pick. And Precocious is actually a 77 overall. He's a little bit better than DJ Ramses right off the bat. So I think this is a really good pick here for the Jazz. They're building up a really good young team in Utah, obviously led by Christopher Killebrew, the talented center who they drafted at the top of the draft last year. That'll bring up the Bulls at number 11, but not for long. This pick is on the move. The New York Knicks are moving back into the lottery as they'll be trading the number 11th pick to New York for the 15th pick, Mitchell Robinson, and a second rounder. So ultimately, this is the Mitchell Robinson trade. He wanted out of New York, and he's going to get his wish. With this being a formal trade request, Mitchell Robinson's trade value is lower. But I think this is a good trade for both sides. The Bulls, they move down 4 spots. They get a young starting caliber player, and we're able to move up and get the guy we really want. We could not have gotten this offer any cheaper. I tried some other deals with the Bulls. They said no, it had to be that. So as we go up to the number 11th pick, the reason why I did this is because there are a couple players who I still really like on the board who I don't think are going to fall to the 15th pick. So I wanted to make sure I could go up and get my guy. There are some interesting trades here. We can get Levi Beauregard again. We can also get some of the other high draft picks like J.J. Henderson or Johnny Cotchery, but those wouldn't be all that realistic. So we're going to stick here with the number 11 pick and get our guy. So of the 4 players we considered with the 9th pick, 2 of them, Imani Juno and Coco Diablo, are still on the board. But we just drafted a 2-guard. Are we going to go that route again? Or is there a big man who we really like down the board who we don't think is going to fall? With the 11th pick in the 2024 NBA draft, the New York Knicks select Coco Diablo, a shooting guard out of Villanova. I know we just drafted a 2-guard, but I'm trying to build my team based around positional flexibility and positionless basketball. I want guys who are versatile and can play 2 to 3 different positions. And just like DJ Ramses, I think Coco Diablo is a very versatile player. He will come in also as a 75 overall. Coco Diablo was one of the most exciting players in college basketball last year for Villanova. He will get fans into the seats at the Garden. This is a New York type of personality, a New York type of player, a truly gifted scorer. On the ball, he is phenomenal at creating his own shot. Off the ball, really solid as well. So this is a guy who can score in so many different ways. As a passer, really impressive. He sees the floor well. He knows how to create opportunities for his teammates. So he has a very similar skill set to DJ Ramses on offense, but he's actually a little bit better offensively. Defensively, he is surprisingly really good. Most players with his skill set and size are not good defenders, but that's not the case with Coco Diablo. He's going to be one of our best perimeter defenders right away. The only kind of weakness with his game is his lack of athleticism, and he's not a bad athlete. He's just not really an explosive athlete. But with his skill set, particularly on offense, based around the three-point shot, he doesn't need to be a world-class athlete to dominate. So I think he's going to be a really good fit here. He fits the modern NBA super well. He fits New York City super well, and I'm really happy that he's a Knick. Moving forward now, the Miami Heat with the 12th pick go with DeAnthony Baker, the point guard out of Cincinnati. I'm a little bit surprised Baker went this high, but I do really like him. He's a 75 overall. In my opinion, the best passer in the entire draft class. There were some mock drafts with him going in the second round, which I didn't really get. I always thought he was a first-round talent. I didn't think he'd go this high, but I don't have a major problem for the Miami Heat picking him here. They do need a real leader of their offense. The Philadelphia 76ers select Woody Balksamer with the 13th pick, the 7'2" big man out of Michigan State. I'm curious about what Philadelphia's plan is here. Is it to have a Twin Towers with Woody and Joel Embiid? Is it to get depth for Joel Embiid? Or is it to maybe trade away Joel Embiid? I think we're going to see Embiid's name in some trade talks really start to heat up over the next year or so. The 14th pick belongs to the Pelicans, but it is on the move. We've got a blockbuster here on draft night. The Washington Wizards have traded away Bradley Beal to the New Orleans Pelicans in exchange for the 14th pick and a first rounder next year. I love this move for New Orleans. They made the NBA Finals last year. They don't need to develop young talent. They've already got their core in place. Why not go out and get an all-star like Bradley Beal? The Wizards are starting fresh. They need to rebuild, and they're going to do that with Imani Juno II out of St. John's. This is really good value. I don't know why he fell to the 14th pick, a guy who we considered at both 9 and 11. So I think this is a phenomenal pick here for the Wizards. They can start fresh. They were really bad last year. It was just time to move on. I think it was a mutual split between Beal and the Wizards, and this will be beneficial for both parties. With the 15th pick, the Chicago Bulls select Max Maddock out of New Zealand. Really solid player. I think he's a guy the Knicks really would have targeted had they not, moved up with Chicago. Clearly, the Bulls were very enamored by Maddock enough to move down a few spots to get him, while also, of course, acquiring Mitchell Robinson along with another pick in the second round. The OKC Thunder back on the board at 16. They go with Julius Jeter out of UMass. Despite trading away 3 first-rounders earlier today, the Thunder still got 2 back in that deal and have 4 first-rounders overall with Onuaku, Castillo, now Julius Jeter, and then another pick at 30. One of the picks they traded away was number 17 right here to the San Antonio Spurs, and they go with Jalen Story out of Clemson. So with the 3 first-rounders that the Spurs got, they have selected Nikolai Sevelchenko, Percy Butler, and Jalen Story. 3 very high floor, very high IQ San Antonio Spurs-esque players. And what's really fun here is he gets to play with Buzz Wigginton III. So Buzz Wigginton's son and Kyril Story's son are now teammates. How cool is that? With the 18th pick, the Denver Nuggets select Dragan Zhang from UCLA. Keep in mind, the Knicks are on the clock and only like 5 or so picks. Dragan Zhang is a guy who I think the Knicks really would have considered at number 22 overall. Really talented, versatile big man. He can shoot the ball, versatile defender, smooth inside. I like that pick a lot for the Nuggets. The Pelicans are back on the clock, and they are trading this pick again. It is going to the Bulls in exchange for Jackson Hayes and Alec Burks. The Pelicans are going all in. They entered today with picks 14 and 19, and they leave today with Bradley Beal, Jackson Hayes, who already has spent 4 years with the Pelicans, and Alec Burks. The Bulls got Jackson Hayes in the Zach LaVine deal with Charlotte, so the Zach LaVine deal is now a 3-team trade with New Orleans as the Bulls select Day Frost, a talented point guard out of the University of Arizona. Only a few picks away from New York. That starts with the Pacers at 20, and they select Alfie Kohn, the 7'2" center out of France. Kohn has been the mystery man of this draft class. His stock has sort of been all over the place. I think he's a guy who the Knicks strongly would have considered with the 22nd overall pick. So unfortunately for them, he goes a few spots before. I really like this pick for Indiana. I think he's got a very high ceiling. And then at 21, the Bulls select Cengiz Yilmaz out of Turkey. Yilmaz is still under contract for 1 more year in Turkey, so he will return overseas, and he will likely enter the NBA next year in 2025 as a talented wing who can be a really good role player for Chicago. So that'll bring the Knicks on the board here at number 22 overall. They've already drafted DJ Ramses and Coco Diablo today, and they're looking to add another player here. They could trade for Mitchell Robinson back. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that bridge has been burned. And again, there weren't many interesting trades in here. I mean, we can get Andre Drummond. We can get Babatunde Precocious, but I don't see why the Jazz would realistically do that. So ultimately, there weren't really any trades that I truly considered here, and ultimately, I decided to keep the number 22 overall pick. So that poses the question, where do we go from here? We've already drafted 2 wings today. Do we want to go with a point guard? Do we want to go with a big? In terms of guys who we invited for pre-draft workouts, the top projected guy who we did that for is Khalif Dumbo. So could he be the pick, or do we go for some size, or do we go for a true point guard? With the number 22 pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, the New York Knicks select Khalif Dumbo, a shooting guard from the NBA's G League Ignite. I know we've already drafted multiple shooting guards today. All 3 of our first-round picks are 2 guards. I get it. But all 3 of these players are super versatile. So Dumbo comes in as a 72 overall. He is very raw. He's got a long ways to go, but the ceiling with him is very high. He reminds me a lot of Anthony Simons coming out of the IMG Academy, and it took a little bit for Simons to develop, but he has turned into a really good player with the Portland Trail Blazers. Doumbou is an unbelievable athlete, and that's really where the upside comes from. He's had so many incredible plays in the G League with his athleticism. Defensively, he's got a little work to do, but I think he's really solid on that end of the floor. Has a lot of energy, and then in transition, he is a missile. Somebody who's really good at scoring inside, obviously known for more of his flashy dunking ability, but he has really improved the other offensive aspects of his game. His jump shot, although it still needs some work, is really improving. He's got good form, and he shot the ball pretty well from three, but the dunking and the athleticism is really obviously what pops off. He is going to be a lob threat. He's got a super explosive first step. So I think with his athleticism, the sky is the limit, although it's going to take a little bit for him to develop. But it's worth to take a flyer here at number 22 overall. The 23rd pick is on the move. The Oklahoma City Thunder are moving back into the first round. They'll be sending away the 35th overall pick from the Spurs, which they got earlier today, and a future first rounder from the Rockets. That's a really good trade back for Orlando. Moving down 12 spots, getting an additional first round pick. The Thunder move up for Kyril Story Jr., also known as KJ Story. So the other Story twin is an Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder are also drafting for upside here, kind of like what we just did with Doumbou. Why not take a flyer on a guy who's got top 10 upside in this year's draft in Kyril Story Jr.? So he joins the Oklahoma City Thunder. With the 24th pick, the Memphis Grizzlies select Samuel Royal out of Georgia Tech. This is a steal. I really thought about him with the 22nd overall pick. It was down to him and Doumbou. Ultimately, I went with Doumbou, but I think Samuel Royal is a total steal for the Memphis Grizzlies. One of the best value picks in the first round, coming in as a 76 overall. He's really going to fit their roster well. He impacts winning, and man, I think that's one of the best picks of the night. With the 25th pick, the Brooklyn Nets select Kenny Cooks out of Ireland. The Nets have a nice little young core coming together, and they add to that here with Kenny Cooks, a talented, explosive point guard from Ireland. If he can improve the three-point shooting, I think he could be a really, really good player at the next level. The Sacramento Kings, with the 26th pick, select Osvaldo Ledo out of USC. He's a really solid two-guard. His stock has kind of gone down throughout the year, but I definitely see him as a first-round talent. Really good role player. He shoots the three ball well, plays good defense, just a really, really good role player. And adding another talented piece to a Kings team who was really solid last year, grabbing the 3 seed in the playoffs. With the 27th pick, the Clippers select Javontavious Carter out of Arizona. 6'8", 290 pounds. He's held a lot of pancakes in his day. He's a big, beefy guy who's going to be making some noise down low here for the Clippers as they add some more size for their rebuild. For Brooklyn Nets at 28, select Otto Dudal, a power forward out of Belgium. He's got a really interesting skill set. He can shoot the ball, particularly from the perimeter. Good playmaker, pretty versatile defender. Although he's only a 69 overall, nice. I think he's really going to develop well. Just another piece here to this nice Brooklyn Nets rebuild. The Cleveland Cavaliers select T. Knox out of Temple with the 29th overall pick. Really a reliable player across the board. Again, a really good playoff team, adding another good role player. Second straight year of the Temple Owl going in the first round. Christian Harris last year by the Suns. Of course, he was traded away earlier today to the Nets. Hero Unimis Misurli, a 7'4" center out of Germany to the Thunder. Oklahoma City's already drafted 4 players today, so their thought process here is why not draft a draft and stash guy who's not going to use up a roster spot. For Brooklyn Nets at 31, select Akihiko Kiyama out of Japan. Really talented young guard. I thought he was going to go in the second round, although I think he's a first-round talent. So I think this is a really, really nice pick here. The Nets are having themselves a very solid draft. And then the Boston Celtics round out the first round by selecting Aleksandar Starcevic from Croatia, a 6'10" power forward. He's got a pretty unique skill set. Another guy who can be a solid role player here for the defending NBA champions. So that'll wrap up the first round of the 2024 NBA Draft. The Knicks currently have one more pick, the 9th overall selection in the second round. There are still some really good players on the board here going into round 2. Let's take a look at the first round recap. First, the Knicks entered with picks 9, 15, and 22. They leave with 9, 11, and 22, adding DJ Ramses Coco Diablo, and Ra Khalif Doumbou. 3 players who have a ton of positional versatility, and I think these 3 guys all have a chance to be really, really good players for us. So overall, I feel really happy with how our first round went. Probably going to be a more straightforward second round for the Knicks, assuming we do end up holding on to that selection and picking a player. There are still some really talented players left on the board, so if the Knicks do hold on to this pick, I think they'll be happy with the guy they ultimately end up choosing. We're going to move through the second round a lot quicker than we did with the first round, so let's not waste any time and get started. The Detroit Pistons are on the clock. They go with Ja'Kai Jackson Jr., a talented 2-guard out of the University of Tennessee. The Houston Rockets with 2 of the next 3 picks. They start with Kostas Papadakis, 7'4", 315 pounds out of Greece. The Magic now with 2 of the next 3 picks. They start with Weston Lamontagne out of Iowa. He was a guy high on the Knicks draft board here going into the second round. Really, really talented player. The Rockets go with Stu Henderson, a point guard out of Syracuse. They already drafted J.J. Henderson, and now they add Stu, who is not related to J.J. at all, but they have the same last name. Rashad Myers out of Texas goes to the Magic. He was getting some real first-round buzz late in the pre-draft cycle, but that proved to all be smoke. Hubert Rumford goes to the Sonics. It's just like Chance Dumas back on Seattle with the big bald head. Both players, ironically, have pretty similar skill sets, so maybe Hubert Rumford will be their Chance Dumas. That'd be pretty cool. The Clippers go with Jamal Janda from Poland. I know he does not look like he is from Poland, but he is. The Brooklyn Nets select Abram Mabaye out of Kansas. He's a player who the Knicks would have really considered here. He might have honestly been their pick, to be honest. So maybe we got pick sniped. I'm not really sure. That'll bring us to the 41st pick in the draft, owned by us. As we go through the trade finder, just a lot of second-round swaps, which could be a decent idea if we ultimately choose not to keep this pick. There are still some pretty good players on the board, but personally, I would rather the flexibility of an extra roster spot going into the offseason, because last year we drafted 6 rookies, and I think that was a mistake. I don't think we left ourselves with enough room to make moves, so we'll be trading this pick along with a future second in 2027 to the Atlanta Hawks for 2 second-rounders next year, 1 from Atlanta, 1 from Oklahoma City. I'm not overly convinced either of those teams are going to be all that good, so we had 2 second-rounders for next year's draft, and it looks like our day is done. Jason Leonard from Australia is the pick to Atlanta. Shez Vorn out of Maryland to the Bulls, 6'4", 255 pounds. Really unique skill set. Malik Murray, point guard out of Purdue to the Nets. Had we stayed with our second-round pick, he probably would have been the guy I chose. I thought he was the best player on the board. The Nets continue to have a really good draft, man. I'm impressed with what Brooklyn's doing. Kareem D'Angelo out of Washington goes to the Heat. Next up, the Pacers select Francisco Lourenco out of Oklahoma. The Milwaukee Bucks pick Nelson Evans, really good role player. I think he'll fit their roster super well. The Philadelphia 76ers select Brandon Bridges from Italy. A lot of Italian players entering the league over these past couple of years. The LA Clippers, they go with John Maximovic out of Kansas, Rock Chalk. Only around 15 or so more picks to go. The Pelicans get Raekwon Schultz out of North Carolina, so this time they finally actually pick a person. Quincy Walker out of North Carolina to the Kings. Isaiah Thomas played in the NBL last year in New Zealand, goes to the Milwaukee Bucks. The Grizzlies get Aleem Strawn, the 6'10" big man out of Alabama. Monty Carter III from St. John's goes to the Bucks. J.D. Burton out of Indiana goes to the Magic. The Pacers select Eloy Aiden Gonzalez from UCLA. They already drafted a 7'2" big. Why not draft someone who's 7'3"? Fujiwara Mukpayade from India goes to the Los Angeles Lakers. The Houston Rockets select Islam Kamiavichenko. The Dallas Mavericks select Jabari Rightford. Now only about 5 or so picks left. The Clippers go with Akihimo Kiyama from Japan. Wasn't this player already drafted? Yes, he was. I accidentally made this guy twice, so I replaced him with another user player, Joe D. Gentry out of Oregon. So he is the pick here to the Clippers instead. The Thunder select Mark Sealy out of Texas Tech. That's a really good value pick late in the second round, 7'2", 285. The Bulls get King Jackson from the Overtime Elite Academy. The Memphis Grizzlies get Levi Payne, another big man out of LSU. 2 more picks. The Wizards get Alexander Samardzki out of Greece. And then Mr. Irrelevant to the Chicago Bulls is Jeff Karnapalatroshian from Air Force. So that'll wrap up the second round. The Knicks entered with the 9th pick in the second round, ultimately deciding to trade it away for future draft picks, so that way we can have more roster flexibility as we enter a very pivotal free agency period in the next episode. Overall, this was a really fun draft, not just for our Knicks, but across the board. A lot of big moves, a bunch of big-time players being traded. Zach LaVine, Keldon Johnson, Bradley Beal, amongst others. All of those guys have new homes, and some big-time trades involving draft picks, including the Oklahoma City Thunder moving up from the number 1 pick, and of course us trading up to number 11 for Coco Diablo, joining DJ Ramses and Khalif Doumbou, in what I think is a really good group of 3 players for our draft class. Looking at some of the other teams around the league, which teams did well? I thought the Magic did well considering they did not have a first-round pick. Gibbons was part of the Wendell Carter trade. He was a draft and stash guy last year. The Nets did phenomenal, in my opinion. In terms of where they drafted, they got phenomenal value with all 5 of their picks. I think Brooklyn's having a really good rebuild. The Pacers with a very interesting draft. Really curious to see how Alfie Kohn does in the NBA. The Rockets with a surprising pick, going with J.J. Henderson at 2, although not a bad pick. The Spurs drafting some really solid players after moving back from the number 1 overall pick. Johnny Conchery to the Suns was one of my favorite picks of the entire draft. I'm really excited to see how he does. The Thunder of the big day, grabbing arguably the 2 best players in the draft, along with Keldon Johnson. So I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander right now is a happy man, but they're going to have to win games next year, or else he could be out the door before no time. The Washington Wizards, I think, made the right move by trading away Bradley Beal, and they got a great pick with Amani Juno. I thought both expansion teams did really well with their draft picks. Curious to see how those 2 teams end up doing next year. The Bucks, I think, for having 3 mid to late second rounders, they drafted 3 solid role players. The Bulls, pretty similar to Washington. I give them a lot of credit for recognizing that it's time to tear it down and rebuild. They've got some good young players for their team going forward into the future. The Clippers had a lot of picks. I thought they did a solid job. I think Javontavious Carter late in the first round is going to be a pretty good pick. Samuel Royal might have been the biggest steal of the entire draft. What a pick for the Memphis Grizzlies. And yeah, there you go. So that just about does it here. And that brings us back to the Knicks. So that's going to wrap up the episode. Let me know what you thought of our draft down below in the comments. I'm really excited with the 3 players we added. DJ Ramses, Coco Diablo, and Khalif Doumbou. I know they're all shooting guards, but I think their skill sets will complement each other really well going forward. Next episode, we're going to wrap up the offseason. We're going to get through free agency. We're going to make some big moves. I want to see this team in the playoffs next year, so we're going to be adding some real talent to this roster. That'll wrap up the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. Peace out.